Welcome to the original Android Hangout show on Google+. I'm Derek Ross.
And I am Scott Anderson.
And I'm Dan Charlton.
I'm Jonathan Franklin.
I'm Chris Wook.
I'm Nate Swanner.
And we are joined this week with special guest Tony McDonald from Technician. Technician is the mastermind behind the Chameleon launcher for Android. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Hey, no problem. It's great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, so if you aren't familiar with Technician or Chameleon launcher, this is actually the third time we've had them on our show. We're very happy to have them continuing to support the show, come back and join us. The first time we had them on there was late last summer when Chameleon launcher for tablets first pushed out to Kickstarter backers, and since then we've had them on talking about a major update to the platform, and now we're back again, I believe, to talk about another major update to the platform. Before we get started with Tony here, I guess if you're not familiar with Chameleon, and Tony, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, the design philosophy behind Chameleon was, home screens on Android are kind of, poorly executed. Home screens should have the information you want at your fingertips. You shouldn't have to go searching for it, and it should be based on context, where you're at and so forth. So you guys set out to make the Android home screen experience much better, correct?
Yeah, that's sort of the simple way to say it, but the idea behind Chameleon was to be sort of a content-centric launcher, which is very different from the way everybody else approaches a launcher. We wanted to do something with Chameleon that was different than just, oh, here's an icon and launch an app, or here's a widget with next to no relevant information showing in it that just looks good on your home screen. Instead, we wanted to make your launcher experience be something that as soon as you turn on your tablet, you'd be seeing enough information that was relevant to you right when you turned it on. So that was primarily the goal, and it informed a lot of the Chameleon philosophy, which in a way was alien to some people at the beginning, because say launchers normally aren't focused on content; they're just pointers to other applications, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's the difference primarily, and how we try to distinguish ourselves and continue to, as Chameleon evolves, we want to continue to explore that idea more and more.
Okay, so as we said, initially when Chameleon Launcher first came about to Android, it was initially just for tablets.
That's right.
And as of this afternoon, Kickstarter backers were happy to find out that something exciting came along the way, Chameleon 2.
Yeah.
Chameleon 2 added support for phones. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, well, the idea, we always wanted to adapt Chameleon to, as much of as big of an Android scope as we could get. But it was true that the history of Chameleon was, it was built off the back of another project that, we at Technician were working on with Texas Instruments, which was tablet-centric at the time. That was the form factor we were shooting at. And we kind of built off that, because what we found was that if you look at a lot of people, maybe it's changed these days, but at the time, a lot of Android tablets, people would have all this screen real estate on their launcher and not really much to do with it. Yeah, you can populate and throw a whole bunch of apps around, but I always find that people might have a launcher screen that's filled with apps, but how often do they actually engage with all that screen real estate? They tend not to. The vast majority of people probably only use a handful of apps rather than this whole scope of apps that they would have on their tablets. So, the tablet idea was us trying to figure out how do we make something engaging, by adding more content that's relevant in the tablet format, and then, eventually we'll go to the phone, because there's a very big difference, and we, especially where we're at now, supporting the tablet and the phone, we've realized the dramatic difference between those two form factors when you're in a content-centric environment. It really, it forced us to change how the widgets work to an extent, and how other things in Chameleon like context and stuff work as well. So we did start from the tablet, but we wanted to expand it out, and there was many little places that we hit that there was almost a conflict between the two form factors that made it challenging for us.
So what was it hard to add tablet support? Were there any major design changes or philosophies that need to be changed along the way?
You mean phone support?
Or, I'm sorry, phone support, yeah.
Yes, there was actually quite a lot. So very simply at the beginning, it just introduced way more devices that we had to develop for. And the thing to remember that's kind of important about Chameleon, it talks to the architecture underneath, is that our Chameleon widgets are HTML based, right? So that being the case, we had to do a lot of HTML and CSS development to get the widgets to behave in all kinds of different sizes and different screen resolutions, different screen densities, which can be a little bit more challenging in some senses in CSS than it is natively in Android. So right there, just widgets alone, we had to approach them and change a few things about how they work. The other thing is, the way we present our grids in Chameleon isn't fixed. It's not the same as the normal Android launchers. We it's more designed from a relative size type perspective. And because of that, the widgets really had to have a proper responsive design kind of implementation, because each box in the grid can actually vary in size depending on what device it is and what the screen density is, and all these various things. So some of the guys that work with us, particularly Ian Shaw, who does a lot of our HTML development and CSS work, man, that guy worked day and night many times to get all of the possible configurations that a lot of the widgets could be in to look decent, right?
So did you guys have any hurdles going from tablet size down to a smaller form factor then?
Yeah, well, we had to change some things about the widgets. Like, for example, the header bars of all our widgets are totally redesigned now, and they're designed to be there's two kind of focuses there. One, they're meant to be bolder and squarer, because on the phone it just felt like you didn't have as much empty free space to deal with. It was much more condensed. So our kind of new square bold headers box things in a little nicer. It looks better on the phone just from an aesthetic perspective. But also we introduced this new sort of action menu. It's your traditional Android options button that's at the top right. And the reason for that is, originally we had the idea that you'd have a few actionable icons on the top right of the widget, but on the phone immediately that goes away, and you're not getting the type of space alongside of the title of the widget that you need on a phone and in that amount of space. So this new dropout menu is the new approach that we've added. And that was kind of interesting too, because it'll allow us with widgets to add a lot more options for actionable items to each individual widget. So that was another major development that we changed. And then throughout the application, it was kind of your more run-of-the-mill dealing with the screen densities and the smaller sizes, and just adapting all the Chameleon graphics to really scale down. And Chameleon now will actually run on very, very small devices. Those, I forget the exact model, but we have one in our office, one of those really tiny phones, and Chameleon runs fine on it. It can be a little bit tight, but at the same time, at least it's not off limits. We can basically go from any size, small size and up now. So
okay, yeah, I noticed that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the phone launcher supports 720p devices and higher. You don't support any lower than that resolution. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the reason for that is mainly an aesthetic thing amongst our design team. They are just nitpicky about that. We could actually go smaller, but then you're starting to enter in the range where things just become a little bit unwieldy. So, the lower limit, is, pretty much as low as we can get it.
Well, makes sense.
Usable,
Okay.
It probably isn't. Most of the ice cream sandwich and above phones that I can think of were 720p anyway, aside from only a handful.
The vast majority of them are.
Just as a reminder to our live listening and watching audience on YouTube and Google+, if you have any questions about Chameleon for Tony, go ahead and drop them in the comments. We have a few more talking points lined up here, and then we'll go ahead and get to your questions. So if you have any, go ahead and put them in the comments, and we'll mark them down, and we'll talk about them here in a little bit. So you talked about a few of the new features and some of the challenges and so forth. Can you kind of go over some of the new features that you're announcing with Chameleon 2?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that are brand new. One thing that I do want to mention is, we really, even though sometimes people don't believe it, we really, really listen to what everyone's saying. And, I mean, this has been a whole adventure for us, this Chameleon thing, but we really, really have listened to the heavy criticisms that people have given us and that. And this new version, we started by actually focusing on critical matters that people were complaining about. So the first thing, and I'm glad to see it today actually, we've really been paying attention to what people are saying, and I'm really glad to hear that where we put most of our focus is what people are noticing. So, for example, Phil and I in particular, you guys know Phil, had spent a lot of time and really pushed out deliverables like within, Technician and for Chameleon to make sure we got a couple of things right. And performance, and especially on older devices and stuff like that, is what we really focused on. So there was a time where Phil and I sat down and we basically gutted a whole bunch of the code that we wrote to render various parts of Chameleon and the HTML widgets, and we rewrote them from scratch. And that's sort of why, like a lot of people say, well, why are you guys taking so long, this and that? Well, Phil and I wanted to make sure that we got a couple of things right at the core going forward, because, we noticed the criticisms were there primarily. And so we did that, and luckily, like, the good news today is people are saying, yeah, it's performing great on my old tablet, the transitions are smooth, it feels great. So, like, we put a lot of effort into that. Like, over 50% of the time spent was just making it faster, making it perform on old devices, and get where we want. So that's a big thing, and I know that's not necessarily bells and whistles things people get excited about, but it was something we wanted to get right, and I think we did in this version. But
yeah, I definitely think you did get it right.
Yeah, and like the one thing I've realized about Android development, because I've been doing it now for a couple of years, but I mean, to do it right, you have to have an army of devices in your shop. Like for us now, like, I mean, everyone's desk is covered in 5 or 10 devices. If you ever see Ian Shaw that works for us, he's always posting pics on Instagram of, when he's designing widgets and stuff, he's got like 10 devices on his desk, and, they're all running the same thing, and he's updated. It's hilarious. But it really is like that with the Android development. It's crazy. But so that was the focus. But new features in Chameleon, stuff that is great, is one of the biggest things was when we finished Chameleon, the first version, aside from performance stuff that we knew we had to fix, another thing that we didn't think we got right was something that we were actually trying to focus on, which was this whole concept of context-oriented, data and dashboards, right?
Yeah.
Now, we liked the idea, and we thought we were in the right ballpark, but I remember Gabor Vida, he's our president and stuff, he sat down with us one day and said, there's something wrong with context, and he explained his vision of what he wanted it to become. And I agreed with him, and Phil and I know there was technical reasons why we wanted to go in the same direction, but it was this idea of, okay, with Chameleon we want to get to this, but we'll put that feature out a little bit. But as we started reworking on this new version of Chameleon, eventually we said, okay, let's just do it now too while we're doing this big overhaul of various other things. And we got it in. So one thing people notice is the whole idea of context-oriented dashboards is very different in the new Chameleon. Instead of it being, originally it was like, I've got 5 pages, and each of those pages I can attach rules to, and then Chameleon will switch between those pages. We discarded that, and now it's sort of like your dashboard scenario opens up and you've got 3 pages beside, and that's one context. So you apply your rules of time and space or whatever to that, and then you can create, right now I think the maximum limit we have of context is 15, but that's just arbitrary for now. We could actually make it bigger and hopefully want to go to the world where you can have unlimited amount of context. So each dashboard context you create gets 3 pages. It gets its own app tray and all of this stuff, and you can create context for anything. Like, it's not only just spatial stuff too. It's not even just like, oh, I'm traveling, or oh, it's 9 p.m. activate this. You can create content-oriented ones as well. So, like, I create dashboards for, I'm a hockey fan because I'm a Canadian, or, I guess that's a good comparison. But, like on a game night where my team, the Ottawa Senators, are playing, I have a dashboard that's just related to Twitter feeds and news feeds of what's going on game night, and that dashboard will automatically activate itself, if I wanted to, but normally I'll just switch it on and look at all the pre-prepared feeds or whatever.
So if you had it set for, let's say 9 p.m. was the time that the game time was.
Yeah.
On time, it would automatically, contextually, it would switch over to your game feed and have your Twitter feeds, your RSS feeds set up for the hockey news or whatever. Yeah.
But we've tried to set it up so that the contextual rules aren't the only thing about context now. Now you can create topical dashboards as well that don't necessarily have rules. They're just something you can switch to. And there was technical reasons for that change as well, which was that the way we were doing it in the original Chameleon, eventually we would just not have the capacity and memory to load all this stuff in real time the way it worked. So now each context, when you switch context, it reloads the dashboards up individually. So it allows us to add way more context but not hold them all in memory at the same time. So it was both a technical challenge and a UX challenge, and I think in the new Chameleon it sets the standard for where we're going with it in the future, and we've got some great ideas of how to expand it in the future as well. So that's one big one that people notice as a difference. Other things, this is just stuff that people wanted to see. So we've added folders, as you'd expect.
And that's big. I noticed that as well. I thought that was big because, we're so used to organizing things in folders, and I was actually missing that in previous versions of Chameleon. Yeah. I noticed it yesterday when I loaded it up, and I thought, hey, what's this little link icon here? And I started playing around with it, and I'll let you talk about it. But
well, I'll explain that, because that's the new concept that we put in there. But to talk about folders first, people wanted it. It's pretty standard issue. In Chameleon, the first Chameleon, the only reason we didn't do it was just we wanted to get something out to the public, and we were focused more at that time on the widget experience and the content experience. But folders, were always on our product backlog. We knew we were doing it, so now it's there. People have it just like they'd expect. But what we also added was linked folders, like you said, which is something a little bit different that, I've gotten some great feedback from it, but at first people are puzzled by it a little bit. We're going to upload some videos next week probably that'll explain some of these features that people can see. But linked folders, the concept behind it is if you create a folder in Chameleon and you open it, it's got, as you said, this little link icon that you can click. And when you do that, it basically creates like a saved version of that folder that sits sort of where your apps are. There's another tab there. I don't know. Well, people see it when they download it. But the whole idea is then you can create multiple instances of that folder. So that original template of it, you can create and put that same folder wherever you want. Now, every time you create an instance of that folder, all those folders, as long as they have the little link icon, they're all linked. So if you change one, like if you change its title or its contents, every instance of it where you put it also updates, right? So they remain in sync all the time. But the reason it's there that makes it special is Chameleon, the idea is we're trying to promote contextual dashboards. So you're using this, context or this one, and it gets annoying if you were the type of person that would have 10 contexts. you don't necessarily want to add your phone and your messages and your blah blah blah, like all these grouped apps, your games or whatever it may be, to your dashboard every time. So if you create a linked folder, you can instantiate it across contexts and it'll remain in sync across all of those. So think of those linked folders as like a reusable group. Once you create that group, you can put that group anywhere, and anytime you change it, everywhere else will remain in sync all the time. So
Can you delete the group?
What's that?
Can you delete the group?
If you delete the group, then right now in Chameleon what'll happen is when you go to delete it, it'll say, whoa, if there's instances of it across, it'll say, oh, there's instances, it'll remove them, basically. We're going to play with that feature a little bit, and I'm open to feedback on that feature. Like if people say, hey, it'd be cool if it worked this way or that way. Actually, from our alpha testers, who are awesome, by the way, thumbs up to them. They're kind of our secret group of people. They've given me and Phil and the team working on that, some great feedback of things that I'm already thinking of changing a little bit about linked folders. But it's a feature that works pretty well in Chameleon. It's very useful, especially if you use context. But it's kind of new, and I'm open to feedback from what people say when they see it.
I like the linked folders. I'm one of the guys that likes to have a folder with all my Google apps, on my home screen. I like that. So no matter what my home screen looks like, I want to have all my Google apps right there, just in case. So the fact that I can now do that, that's very nice.
Well, to give you guys an idea, if you want to know where we're going with it, I have some development stuff already. It's not in this version of Chameleon, but just to give people an idea of where it's going, is this, like, linked folders are like user controlled, right? So you create a group and you say, that's my group and I want to use that all over the place and keep it in sync. But that little folders tab, I got a tweet today, people are saying, well, that's a lot of screen real estate just for a couple of folders that I created. Well, what I intend to add to it in the future is intent, like, I don't know how many people are developer oriented here, but probably a lot, but they're going to be intent oriented folders. So it would be things like, you can say, well, it'll probably be done automatically, but Chameleon will automatically create a few folders and search for certain intent categories, like things that are labeled as games or things that are labeled as productivity, and automatically create those as folders.
That's very cool. Automatically find all your social apps or something, and put them all in a folder. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, so stuff like that is where we're going to go with it, and we've got even some more advanced ideas around folders and some stuff we want to do there.
Have a automatically create your social screen or something like that. Yeah, very very neat.
Yeah, so that's one. Another one, if you want another feature. Sorry, I don't know how much time I'm taking.
Go ahead. Yeah, talk about another feature.
I could talk all night, but another feature. This one is huge. People were yelling at us all the time about this one, so we finally did it, but it's a middle ground, I would say. Is that people, like, one of the funny things, people are like, why can't I put an icon on my dashboard? Like, people were outraged in some ways about that, like, kind of in a good way. But what people didn't realize is, and maybe it's partially our fault, is Chameleon, we wanted it to be a content-oriented experience. So, like, I keep saying that, but that was our philosophy. So the idea was we wanted to use as much dashboard space as we could for content that was important to you, and we used ourselves as templates. So we're Twitter users and Instagram users and Facebook users. So our widgets, we wanted to put them front and center, right? So to us, like, apps on the dashboard was a minor factor. Like, to us, we wanted to have our tweets and all that taking up all the space. And, we did realize, we were like, okay, this is where, the status quo is kind of dragging us into doing it this way. And, people have a good case, like, okay, I want to put more for it. So we were trying to solve the problem, and it was kind of like a head scratcher, because we were like, well, do we introduce a new grid that's designed for icons like all the other launchers, or is there a way to meet in the middle? So what we did is we introduced this new thing in the new Chameleon that we call app launcher widgets, which is basically halfway between from what we want and what people were asking us for on that tip. So basically the idea is, now if you grab to pick up an app from Chameleon from the app the main app grid or whatever, it'll pop down and it'll say, would you like to put this to the dashboard? You drag it up there, it snaps back down to your dashboard, and as you drag over the dashboard, you see the grid highlight with this blue kind of highlight in this circle in the middle. As you move it in, it'll prompt you, it'll turn to a plus sign, and if you drop it, it creates a widget like every other Chameleon widget, but that Chameleon widget is an app grid. So you can it essentially creates the same effect of putting apps on your dashboard like you'd be used to in other launchers, except it's in the container of a widget, which kind of creates this interesting situation because you can create folders and drop whatever you want on there, but you can edit that widget, change its size, its pages, so you could add like every app you want into one of these widgets, and you could have it being like a 1-by-1, and you could scroll through every single app if you wanted in an app launcher widget. So it was kind of us meeting in the middle. We thought it was kind of cool too, because if you lay out apps on your dashboard, you can move them around and resize them, and it kind of is a different approach as to everyone else. And it met in the middle from sort of like the architecture of Chameleon without us having to fundamentally change our approach to widgets and that. So again, that's another thing that we think is kind of cool. We'll see what people say. I'm looking for feedback on it, like via our Twitter account or the Chameleon forums and all that. Tell us what you think, but it works out pretty well. That's at least our opinion.
Yeah, I put some app widgets, I guess as we'll call them, on my screen, my home screen. Yeah, I like that feature. Said I'm one of the guys that I have a few screens set up using the standard widgets, the Chameleon widgets, and then I have another screen with some Android widgets and then some apps as well. So actually, speaking of widgets, I know a lot of people wanted to know, are more Chameleon-based widgets coming? I remember back when we first spoke with you guys many months ago, Philip had said that at some point that you were envisioning almost, for lack of better words, I'll call it like an app store, a place to go to get widgets that other people had developed, the third-party developers had added and submitted to this store. Is that something that you're still thinking of adding in the future, or has that changed at all?
Yeah, it's changed a little bit, but it's surprising because it's something that we actually worked a lot on, and it works really well in Chameleon right now, but not a lot of people know about it because we haven't made a big stink about it yet, but we're going to in this version. So the thing about it is, right now we haven't introduced a store because as say, like Chameleon, we're still small, like the team doing it, and we're not, I guess, at this very point in time, prepared to invest in doing that yet, like making a big story. You have to get the interest there first, right? So what we've done though, and I've posted a bit on our Twitter account about this today, and a few of us on the team intend to do a blog post in detail about this over the next couple days, maybe into next week, is that Chameleon has a system built into it where if you create an HTML widget, which by the way we have a whole SDK that we've created where people can create HTML widgets for Chameleon, which is out there and people are using that already. So you can do that, but Chameleon can install widgets like directly, right? So we actually have this Chameleon protocol that you can use. It's like an install protocol that if you make a web page and you hit it using anything like your browser in Chameleon, you can create a link that will actually prompt the user to install a Chameleon widget if you've created one. And we have a whole bunch of people that work with us on our beta site and our alpha group or whatever that have done a lot of that. Like one guy I know in particular, Matthew Toll, he's done a whole set of widgets he's still working on. There's a few others as well that have experimented with it. And you can install these widgets. It's very, very easy to do. So at this stage, what we intend to do is just take the lid off that and say to people, well, if you want to make widgets, it's actually really easy. And the Chameleon APIs for doing it in JavaScript, like expose all this great simple stuff for things like tapping into our settings windows and all that, and tapping into OAuth, for example. Like, it simplifies that process. We've got all that streamlined, and it's really quite easy to make cool widgets. So we want to try and promote, see if there's anyone out there that wants to develop some good HTML widgets, and we're going to try and bolster a little bit of a community exchange. Already out there, a few guys that kind of got into it already and started experimenting, set up a little site. It's like ChameleonWidgets.com. It's still very early on. They just basically set up the infrastructure to exchange and install widgets that people make, and we're going to build off that. So we're going to keep it open for now. And if it turns into something that people are interested in and want to contribute to, well, then that'll drive us to potentially build the store or that. But I think it's still, for us right now, a little bit early for that.
I like that approach, only because recently, I don't know how familiar you are with Dash Clock widget, if you've heard about it. It's the latest craze, in my opinion, with Android. Everybody's making extensions to hook into this new widget, and so many apps are adding support. People were adding third-party extensions, and it's just the latest craze right now. And I think that would be awesome if something along those lines continued with Chameleon, where people were just randomly making additional widgets and contributing to it from a community standpoint, and just letting the community grow it. I think that I like that approach.
Well, it's in our court, right, at this point, because we have the functionality. Like, I mean, our widget SDK, our approach to it, this is part of the reason why we chose to go that way, in a way, is because, not everybody that wants to make content is a Java programmer or an Android programmer and, is willing to download, the Android SDK and do all this stuff. We've really been experimenting with, web developer types that, are use a lot simpler of a tool set, and the widgets are a lot simpler in their nature. So that's sort of where the Chameleon philosophy for widgets is. But that being said, we have the infrastructure in our widget system. We drink our own Kool-Aid. All of our widgets are made on the exact same platform that we put out to everybody else in JavaScript, and the feature set that we have for them, we've implemented a web caching system that is super robust. It's not just your traditional HTML5 web cache. This thing, pulls down files in real time across multiple domains and makes them available. You've got all data saving mechanisms. You've got, you can tap into Android's full intent system and do all kinds of neat stuff there. And you can even create native Android services if you are an Android developer and have your HTML widget leverage that, like our calendar widget does. That's built on the exact same system that we put out there. So that kind of thing is what we're going to try and focus on in the next little while. We do have one other widget that is almost finished, and people are on our back about this all the time because we did talk about it. So we do have a media player widget as well. It's not designed in HTML. It's actually, Chameleon has about 3 or 4 different types of widgets, actually, under the hood. So we've got our HTML5 widgets. We support Android application or app widgets. And then we have 2 other types internally to Chameleon. So one example of that is our Make a widget is an Android or a Chameleon native widget, and the music player widget will be like that too. So it'll be something that is sort of native in the code in Chameleon, but it's almost finished. We have it pretty much ready. We just backburnered it a bit for this release because there was other priorities that we thought were higher on the scale, but it won't be very long. We've pretty much got it finished, and people keep bugging us for it, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna get there. It's just there's other things that we need to get straight first, so there will be more.
We have a handful of user questions. Let's take a break from some of our questions. Dan, you want to hit up some of the user questions people have been submitting?
Yeah, so Dexter Johnson asked about the performance. So how is it compared to the stock Android launcher in terms of resource usage, general performance, etc.?
the good news on that is the newest Chameleon, what you'll notice right away is, it's just responsiveness is so much faster than the previous Chameleon was, which is good. We really focus on that, so the rendering and stuff like that. But like, I'll air the baggage right away. Like, I'm one of the lead engineers on it, me and Phil, and I can talk to this because it's potentially one of our biggest challenges, and something that doesn't always come out in the normal blogs. So think about this, is that Chameleon uses and leverages web views in Android, for those that are technical, to render the widgets, which gives us, as say, a lot of advantages. We can install them and uninstall them in real time and simplify like workflow in a lot of ways. But our biggest challenge completely has been dealing with the implementation of WebView on Android and its various versions. Like, I would almost go to the point to say that it's been a nightmare. That and I can list 3 bugs in particular that are Android like system level bugs that have almost been showstoppers for us, that we've barely been able to circumvent. So 2 of them are very well known amongst the development community, just issues that have not been addressed. Actually, one was addressed in Jelly Bean and now it's fixed. But see, this is the type of issue that we have, is like in Jelly Bean and up, everything's okay. But in, for example, Android 4.0.3, there was a brutal bug in WebView that just literally would crash Chameleon, and nothing to do with any of our code's fault. It was something we couldn't change. And it's that.
How did you get around that? Were you able to get around that? What if devices are stuck on 4.03?
So, well, we've sort of contained it. There is an issue with it. I'll admit that straight up. We're actually going to do a post about that directly. There isn't really a way around it, because the problem, for the technical heads out there, is basically that once a web view, or if you use web views in an Android application in 4.0.3, what will happen is that the WebView system, or like the web core, puts a limit of 512 local file references on you, right? So that means basically if I load files locally from the system, which we have to do through our web cache to make our widgets work, if 512 references are made, then everything just crashes. There's no way around it at all. It's inside, that Android ROM, or inside, the basic Android of that version. So it's been logged many times, and people have been totally frustrated about it. It was such a bad bug that they fixed it shortly thereafter. So, now we're okay in the newer versions. But in that particular series, like, there's nothing we can do about it. So it's that type of frustration. We've had others as well. Like, any Android developer out there that may have worked with WebView in the environment where we are, where we're creating an app on the App Store, has probably encountered some of the others. Like, some of them like to do with WebView memory leaks, for example, which are well known from which context you pass to it, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is developer stuff. Another issue is that our Android widgets use WebView and use a transparent background, which means that on certain old Samsung devices, like I was saying before, their implementation of WebView creates this weird problem that we refer to as double draw, where it all of a sudden these Samsung implementations of WebView catches this one first view of the widget and won't release it. And that one we eventually figured out a fix for, but it was literally we have to force re-render and resize the widget by 1 pixel in the background in order to get the background implementation to redraw the widget properly. So the problem is that part of Chameleon around the web widgets has been a bit of a nightmare, because the basic implementation of WebKit and how it's exposed through the Android SDK is filled with problematic bugs, like ones that we've had to work night and day to try and figure out how to get around, if we could at all. So it's been a challenge. That is, I would say, it's like, out of all the problems that we face when working with Android and working on Chameleon, 60 to 70% of all the problems we face come from WebView and the implementation of it on various devices, and how it's different on various devices and platforms is a challenge.
So it sounds like you guys have a lot of fun. So
yeah. we've almost got to the point where we, just to put it this way, where we've had to, almost been forced to, by Android, totally abandon the HTML5 thing altogether, because it's that problematic, like across the fragmented atmosphere of Android.
So one of the other listeners asks, where can they get this launcher? Right? You've been here talking about it. Where can they go and find it? Is it on the Play Store? Does it cost money? What do they have to do to get it?
Well, right now, so on Google Play, we have it up there, and if people go and look, they're going to see a plethora of things, and actually in the future, they're going to see a plethora more of things. So what we have is, Chameleon was originally started as a Kickstarter project. That, if you go there, you're going to see, oh, Chameleon launcher pre-orders free, right? Well, the thing is, if you download that Chameleon, you won't be able to use it because it's only for people that have registered and paid, or sorry, not just paid, but contributed to our Kickstarter campaign. So that's closed now. You can't use that unless you're a Kickstarter. We do have Chameleon for sale. That's the normal pay version or whatever. It's $3.99. But
yes, that's correct.
I would tell people, just hold up. We haven't released the new Chameleon to that yet, because our promise to Kickstarters is we'd give them the first stab at this new version, which we're very proud of. And they get the first stab at the phone, and also they are working with us to clear out some of the final issues. So, you know, we're still collecting feedback. Right now, our Kickstarter edition that's out there, you know, we have a tool in there where we're logging feedback and logging bugs and stuff like that. So we still got a bit more time to just get it perfect. So when that's finished, it'll go to Google Play, to the pay version, and people will be able to download it for I think it's, sorry, I got to check. It's $3.99.
It's $3.99. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But we're also going to create a new version on Google Play that'll just be specifically tailored for the phone only, for those that are phone-oriented people that just want that and not the tablet experience. And it'll be $1 cheaper, so it'll be a $2.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So,
and
you know,
the $3.99 version includes both phone and tablet then?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
So that's what you can expect to come or to see there.
Well, that's very good. I didn't know that. Okay.
All right, so we have another user asking if the launcher still works with live wallpapers.
So no, it does not. And you know, this is something that's kind of interesting, is wallpapers are something we opted out of Chameleon. It's actually been a debate in our office. We can return to using or like showing natural Android wallpapers. The reason that we don't is twofold. One is that our design team in particular, who are really nitpicky, wanted the design to work a certain way where, you know, like as say the wallpaper is part of the dashboards that slide up and down and reveal, and you just can't capture that from the native Android wallpaper system. It must remain there, especially live wallpapers, which there's no access to at all as an Android developer. So we kind of put a layer over top of that. However, we've always kind of in our back pocket had, well, we can return to that system if we want to, and maybe we will in the future if people really want just to tap into the normal Android wallpaper system. So right now, we kind of dodge it, but we can come back to it. And our design team likes to make cool wallpapers. We have kind of our own wallpaper system. You know, we like it. We think it's cool. And, you know, as say our design team would probably, you know, bark at most people's wallpaper configurations anyway and go, who wants to look at that, you know?
Now, Tony, can't you can share any image on your phone with Chameleon Launcher and use that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a custom implementation of wallpapers that we made specifically for Chameleon that we sort of control. But, you know, talking about live wallpapers, people would say, can I use live wallpapers? No, but that's just because we block it with our own wallpaper system.
But you can use your own regular wallpaper you want to use. Okay.
Yeah, you could. But, you know, we're always open. Like, if there's enough feedback where people say, you know what, I'd really like to use my whatever crazy live wallpaper with Chameleon, well, you know, that would push us over the edge to enable that, right?
All right. So another listener question is, would you ever consider adding a root version to increase some of the functionality or potentially some of the widgets that you'd be able to display?
Well, you know, the thing is that we listen to everything people say, and, you know, we have our own feature list. Like, we're passionate about features. We actually have a whole bunch of things we want to do, and believe it or not, they're very different than probably what most people are thinking, because as I say, we've got this kind of weird vision of how we want to detour Chameleon away from the status quo more, even from launchers. But we're driven by what people want. So if people communicate with us and make a big enough stink about it, we will do whatever needs to be done. You know, so like we're open to anything, so anything's possible.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other user questions, Dan?
Not that I've seen.
All right, so let's go back to our list here. I believe John...
Well, I've got one other thing I can address, actually, that I thought about. Because it goes back to the first question you guys asked me from users, and it's something I would like to address, because I've already talked about it a couple times on Twitter tonight. Just because it's a thing that, again, me and Phil have faced big time, and I'd like to share it with everybody so everyone can sort of see what we're facing. This is to do with performance and stability, like people asked about that. And one of the biggest questions we get from people that are technical enough and know what they're doing on Android, they'll say, why does Chameleon use so much memory or so much RAM, right? That we get that a lot, and it's true, it does. And I just wanted to address that, the reason why. Because Chameleon can often use double, in some cases, the amount that some other launchers use, right? So I wanted to address that here, if you guys are open to it.
Sure.
So Chameleon, first off, we use web views to render a lot of the content that is our widgets, right? And web views are something that, you know, if you're developing an application the way we're distributing it over Google Play, it's a system-oriented service. It's not part of our application. So, you know, we instantiate these web views and they allow us to render the HTML content. That memory is actually held by Android and managed by Android, not by us. But if you look at the you know, the memory reports from various tools, it automatically associates that memory with us, which is fine. But the main reason why Chameleon uses so much memory is because our widgets are like mini applications. So some people would say, whoa, Chameleon's using 100 megs of RAM. That's outrageous. And then I'm like, yeah, you're right. It is if you look at it that way. But think about this. Take a look at Twitter running on your device. Add it to the amount of memory Instagram's using on your device and Facebook, and then add a launcher to that as well, and then calculate what you end up with, right? And if you look at that, you'll see Chameleon behaves exactly within the frame of memory that it should. So the thing is, Chameleon's not just a launcher. We're not just icons with folders and a nice transition on there. Like, our widgets are full-bore, you know, applications in a way that stand alone. And, you know, we can't leverage Twitter's local data because they don't expose that, right? Like, they're not going to open that sandbox for people. So we have to go out and get that data ourselves. So our Twitter widget is a mini Twitter application. Same with our Instagram, same with our Facebook. So if you have a dashboard filled with those widgets, we have to take on that memory, right? And that's why it looks like, you know, Chameleon, wow, it's running with a lot of memory. But if Chameleon's doing its job right, hopefully it is, maybe it's not, I don't know, we'll see what people say. But you'll probably get, if you're a user of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, everything you need to know just by turning on your tablet and seeing Chameleon, not necessarily going and navigating through all these individual apps. Our goal was to go, you know, it's to be always relevant, immediately valuable. You open up Chameleon, bam, your Twitter feed's there, your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed, you know what you need to know, and you didn't go clicking through all these apps. So we were ready to take on that memory and the you know, that heavy load of memory that comes on just to achieve that. There's no way around that, right? So that's the explanation when people ask me, why does Chameleon use 100 or 120 megs of RAM? Well, because you want to see a lot of content, that's why.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Really running less a launcher and more a window manager than...
Yeah. It's a content experience posing as a launcher, if you will. You know? Sort of like that.
Yeah.
John, I believe you had a question for Tony?
Yeah, just looking at, especially in the last year or so, you look at like HTC when they announced Sense 5 and some parts of like TouchWiz and even with Google Now and having context, it seems like a lot of people are agreeing on the philosophy of having context and content become a bigger part of your home screen.
Yep.
And I know you originally said this was a project that came from working with Texas Instruments. So
Yep.
could you see working with OEMs in the future that would want to bring Chameleon almost as a stock experience to a device, off the shelf? Or
Well, I mean, so there's things I can say and things I can't say, but yes. is the
understandable
answer to
that.
Yeah. So that's sort of our goal is, we've known people are interested in this idea, and we're just exploring it raw. Like, to us, we realized it was a good idea and we tried to execute on it. There's certain things, for example, that Google can do that we can't do, right? They have information that we just can never get access to. So it's inevitable that they're going to make that same move. But for us, we just wanted to explore that space and see what one could do, even with the information that was just available to us. And as I say, we do, one of the things with Chameleon that took us some time to get here, right? Like, a lot of people have said, well, why did it take you 2 or 3 months from the last update till here? Well, we wanted to reorganize a couple of things because we want to get ourselves on a road where we can innovate away from the status quo. Like, our biggest problem is the status quo, actually, is that we end up in this arms race with other launchers that we don't want to be in. People keep saying to us, they're like, hey, well, this launcher has this feature and you guys don't, and this one has this feature, and we're like, who cares? We don't care about that. What we want to start doing is being something very different, and that's the future for Chameleon, is something that is a launcher, but not like the traditional status quo launcher that you think. And in the future, we're going to continue to push it in that direction. And context, like you said, is an area where we really want to focus. And as I said, when we changed the context system in the new Chameleon to present it differently, what the idea was behind that was we had to get the foundation for that right in order to innovate further. So that's what we focused on in the last little while, and that's why we delayed our timelines, because we realized we wouldn't get where we wanted to go without that change and without that hold-up at that time. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But, I can give you an idea that if you guys want to know, like, I'm talking like here and say these grand ideas that are invisible, but let me throw you a scenario that kind of gives you an idea of where we could go. Is what about a situation, for example, for Chameleon, where some user, like, how many people are on this chat or on this system right now, like, watching this? I don't know. I can't tell because I'm.
Oh, there's 7 people in the Hangout right now.
Okay.
Total.
But say you got a group of people and you guys have a fan base, for your site. What happens if we allowed you guys really easily to create the Android Authority dashboard that other users could download and you guys could manage in the way where you guys could decide what content shows on a dashboard and update it remotely at any time, and the app tray or whatever for that dashboard, you guys could not only decide what apps are in there, but you could promote other apps. You could say, hey, this is our app of the week, and in that person's launcher, if they didn't have it, it would appear like, hey, download this app of the week. That's the type of area, that's where we want to go with it, and have some fun kind of up that alley that's way different than other launchers. So that's sort of like a vision thing for you to see where we're going and what we mean by context. Our dashboards, we want to turn them into this thing that is bigger and shareable and all these kind of things.
I think that'll be interesting for brands, for pages, for entities to go out there and do whatever they need to do to download their dashboard or distribute their dashboard to their customers, their clients. That's an interesting concept. Okay. Well, if anybody else is watching this live right now and has a question for Tony, go ahead and drop it in the comments. If not, we're going to move on to a few minutes of Android news. This segment ran a lot longer than anticipated, but you know what? We found out a lot of cool stuff about Chameleon that we didn't know. Some exciting information, some possible scenarios about the future, and it's always exciting. These guys have been constantly adding stuff. As Tony said in the beginning of the show, that they listen to feedback, and they really have. I've seen this launcher grow over time, adding user requests and keep getting better and better and better. It's definitely something to check out if you haven't done so yet. Okay, I do not see any new questions, so let's chat about some Android news real quick for another 5 minutes here, and then we'll wrap up the show. So really quick, we saw the Galaxy Nexus get an unofficial. Well, I'm sorry, we saw the Galaxy Nexus on Verizon get updated through a leak to Android 4.2.
So sad. So sad.
Which is great that somebody found the link on Google servers and distributed it. It's sad that it
had to be leaked.
It's sad it's 4 updates behind and Verizon hasn't updated it yet. So if you want this ROM, you have to be on this stock 4.1.1 ROM, and then there's a download. It's like 80 meg or 90 meg, and you flash it through ADB sideload. And it's what it's supposed to be, the most current version of Android in its full glory. So if you have a Verizon 4.2.2.
Wow.
Oh, it's the latest. Oh, yeah, it's the latest version of Android. You know, it brings it up to date.
Verizon had to wait until the 4.2.2.
Well, you know what? Something it has new radios in and everything. Everybody said, 4.1.2 was too buggy. That's why Verizon didn't do it. And then they said, 4.1 or 4.2 was buggy. And people's making excuses
I'm
for
pretty
Verizon.
sure it's Verizon that's buggy.
People are making.
Verizon
4.0 was buggy technically, and they still released the phone. So
Verizon was just waiting to release new radios to say that, hey, it's got something new that we put in it, but wait for our ass to put it in there.
So there's new radios. If you're rocking the Galaxy Nexus on Big Red, let us know how those new radios work out. I slapped it on my wife's phone, my old Galaxy Nexus, and my dad has a Galaxy Nexus. A couple other friends have Galaxy Nexus
well.
still. They're all running the new radios so far. They really can't tell any difference. But hey, if you notice something awesome, let us know.
Battery life, maybe. Hey, you mentioned Big Red. I need to try Big Red gum.
Any other notable device news, real quick? Motorola, Razer. Yeah, we can talk about that.
It was Jelly Bean update day.
Well, you know what's really cool about the Razer getting Jelly Bean, the Razer and the Razer Max, is Motorola or / Googorola actually did some cool stuff. They removed all sorts of crap from Blur that you don't need. They removed Moto Active, Moto Print, Verizon Video on Demand. They're all dead. They removed like the alarm and the timer, and they replaced them with a stock Google clock. So they actually put stock Google apps in there. They removed like MotoCast and My Gallery and My Music, and they replaced them with Gallery and Google Play Music. Like they removed bloat and put
trimming
in
the fat.
Yeah, and they put in good, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome that Motorola is doing that. So start spamming your update button if you have the Razer or Razer Max. You should have Jelly Bean 4.1.2 available.
Service framework, force stop, clear cache.
All the little tricks. Try to get it.
Oh yeah.
So Dan, you want to bring us up to date on some real quick patent wars?
Yes, the big news over the last week was Judge Koh somewhat reversing course and setting aside, or vacating rather, some $450 million out of Apple's little over $1 billion award. So almost half of that big victory just disappeared. But not entirely. She's actually ordering a new trial, so there will be presumably some damages to come from that trial, but almost certainly not $450 million worth, because any quasi-sane jury would never have awarded, but was awarded in the first place. But really the big piece of this is she's now turning back on the, oh no, this was a totally valid jury decision, and having to set aside almost half of it, and is holding off on the retrial until after the appeal, making it more and more obvious that the appeal is not going to uphold any of her rulings.
All right, so to keep the show at an hour here, one more quick question I want to ask Nate. Nate recently wrote an article for Android Authority basically saying that what if the most hyped phone of this year, I assume it's going to be, fails? Last year the Galaxy S3 sold an insane amount of phones. It was insanely hyped and completely successful. And Nate's take on it was, well, what if the S4 flops? So Nate, you want to tell us a little bit about that? What were your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that were, kind of when you look back, like the BlackBerry, the Z10, that was really hyped, and then when it came out, it was just kind of like, okay. iPhone 5, same thing. That was kind of a big womp womp moment for Apple. So my thought was, there's a lot of hype to it, and everybody's excited, but what if it's not what we think it is?
Yeah, I think when it probably is not going to have that octa-core CPU, a lot of people are going to be really pissed. Just like they were with the SGS3 about not having the Exynos 5. Then again, people still bought it in droves, and people are still buying the iPhone 5 in droves.
And you got to remember, the only people that actually care about what's underneath the hood is the people that are probably watching this right now. The people that actually buy the devices, the general customer, the average consumer that buys it because it's the newest, latest, and greatest, they don't care about numbers. They don't.
You're so right. Like people don't buy the iPhone 5; they buy the iPhone.
Yeah.
The vast
exactly.
majority of their customers just go, "Hey, it's the iPhone. I'm getting a new one," and that's that. It's not because it's the iPhone 5.
And I really think the same thing's going to happen with Samsung's next Galaxy. It's the next Galaxy. They don't
You
care
really
what the
think it's going to
numbers
happen
are.
like that?
Well, look at how many people were disappointed with the GS3 on the tech, us, the techies, when we looked at it and initially said, this doesn't look any better than the 1X.
And then it becomes the best-selling phone of the year.
It turns out they're selling 20 million of them, 10 million pre-orders, but
Samsung's marketing campaign has a lot to blame for that, and I mean they did a great job doing that, and really going against Apple in those commercials. They did a phenomenal job, and they made us tech geeks, laugh hard. And
It's like the Note's doing right now with the
Android
unicorn
into
apocalypse.
us versus them again.
yeah, I don't know if their marketing campaign is going to say the same, but hopefully it does.
And another thing is the Galaxy S3, when you had a couple of phones out, it just didn't do anything blatantly wrong. It didn't do anything particularly the best, but it just, the camera wasn't, it had a good camera, it had a good display, and there wasn't anything that was blatantly awful about it, so it just ended up being a good option.
I guess we'll find out about the S4 next Thursday night when Chris Wookie
And Josh Vergara.
and Josh is going as well. Okay, so two Android Authority guys. Our main man at camera work, Josh Vergara, he's been on the show a couple times, and the man, the myth, the legend, Wookie, he shall be there as well. They're going to do all sorts of badass stuff together and let us know how awesome the S4 is or isn't. I can't wait to watch it.
I kind of expect it isn't. I imagine a
Well,
lot
we'll
of
find
plastic.
it. I'm still saying, if you guys can join live from the event, that'll be great, right?
I just hope that they have an English presenter.
All right, so thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for coming, and Tony from Technician, the guys behind Chameleon. Thank you very much for answering all of our questions, telling us all about Chameleon 2, and I look forward to continuing to test it out on my Droid DNA, which I have a love-hate relationship with. But it works great. It's a 1080p phone, and it looks good. I like it.
Well, thank you very much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. It's great.
All right, so Scott, where can you find us out in those interwebs?
Google Plus page, Android Authority, also YouTube. You can watch us live. Comment there. Comment on the Google Plus page on the live post, and we see all the comments and questions in our feeds. You can also, if you go to AndroidAuthority.com, scroll down to the bottom right, there's an on-air section. After every show we do a little bit of a post, a little bit of a summary of what's going on and what we talked about, and also on SoundCloud, Podbean, and iTunes. And we do have an RSS feed.
And a little teaser here. What is this?
Ooh, look at
I
that.
don't know, but we are going to be giving away 10 of those. Stay tuned to Android Authority.
I like
Have a good night, guys.
Have a good night.
Take care, guys.
it.